tuned into Arirang News, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kwon Jang-won, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. Chinese trade officials will be meeting with their U.S. counterparts in Washington later today to try to resolve the escalating trade dispute between the two superpowers. But President Trump has already said he doesn't expect much to come out of the talks. Then what results can we expect? We'll try to answer that with our guest in the studio later. But first, we head over to our news centre with Devin Whiting, who has the latest on the separated family reunions and other stories we're following in Korea today. Devin?
Hi, Jung-ho. Today was the third and final day of the first round of reunions for Korean families torn apart by more than 6 decades of war and division on the Korean Peninsula. They first met on Monday and said goodbye to each other today, almost certainly forever. Let's go live to our Oh Jung-hee, who's been covering the story this week for us. Jung-hee, it's a sad day for all the families going through a second mentally tough separation. Have the South Koreans come back yet?
Devin, I'm here at the Eastern Inter-Korean Transit Office located in South Korea's northeastern city of Gosong. And actually, the buses carrying 360 South Koreans, including the family reunions participants, the support staff, and members of the press, actually arrived here at the transit office roughly 30 minutes ago. First, the officials in suits came out of the transit office, and second, it was the members of the press that we saw from the exterior of the transit office, and third, we saw almost 200 participants, South Korean participants that attended the family reunions at North Korea's Mount Kumgang. They were in wheelchairs and they were carrying presents that they've received from their North Korean families. Now they've just got onto the buses and they're on their way back to Hanwha Resort, located in the northeastern city of Sokcho, a city that's located only an hour away from this place. And from that Hanwha Resort, they'll be making their ways back home in different cities across the country. So earlier, and this actually means that the 3-day-long family reunions have come to an end completely. So earlier today, the relatives from South and North Korea had one last group session together for 3 hours. And the session, as you can imagine, was full of tears, regret, and feelings that just can't be put into words. A lot of the people that were there were already crying from the moment they saw each other at the meeting room, thinking of having to separate so soon. They told the pool reporters there that their feelings are complicated and that they're unsure if they'll ever be able to meet again. A South Korean father would have a drink of alcohol with his North Korean son for the first and last time in their lives, neither able to say anything. A 99-year-old South Korean mother would tell her North Korean daughters, who are over 70 years old, what kinds of food are good for their health and that she'd pray for their happiness. Sitting side to side, South and North Korean families would see how much they resemble each other, take photos with Polaroid cameras, and exchange their birthdays, addresses, and phone numbers to write to each other in the future if that ever becomes possible. Some would tell each other they need to live for a long time so they can meet again. Devin, the last 3 days have gone by so quickly, and to the people meeting their loved ones up there at Mount Kumgang, they must feel that way even more than we do. And though we say the reunions happened 3 days long, the actual time given to the families was only 12 hours, just about half a day, which isn't enough at all to make up for the past 70 years they've been apart. And another rising concern is how the families will have to cope with the after effects of the family reunions. It's pretty apparent that the families who've participated in the family reunions would continue to recall their experiences, their get-togethers with their North Korean relatives, and continue wishing that they could have done more as families. Back to you, Devin.
A sad day indeed there at Mount Kumgang for families from both South and North. Thank you for that, Jung-hee. Meanwhile, the Korean Peninsula is right in the crosshairs of Typhoon Soulik, which is forecast to make a direct hit on Thursday from the southwest. Right now, it's packing winds up to 155 kilometers an hour. The last time a storm of such strength hit Korea in 2010, 5 people were killed. So In-kyung has this report.
Korea is expected to be hit directly by typhoon for the first time in 6 years starting Wednesday. The last typhoon that made landfall on the Korean peninsula was Sanba in 2012. The 19th typhoon of the season, Solek, is heading northwards after it was formed in waters northwest off Guam's coast last week. Although Solek has been categorized to the equivalent to a Category 2 hurricane, it stands out from previous tropical storms as it features an enormous eye. A typical cyclone eye is around a few dozen kilometers wide. However, Typhoon Soulik's eye is more than 100 kilometers wide, indicating that it would take several days for the Korean Peninsula to get out of the direct influence of the storm.
Typhoons usually can't pass over Korea when the North Pacific anti-cyclone surrounds the peninsula. Korea has been free from typhoons directly influencing the nation because the North Pacific anti-cyclone has been rotating over the peninsula.
Korean authorities are on high alert and are bracing for potential damage. Typhoon Soulik is forecast to be similar to Kampasu in 2010, which claimed 5 lives and caused widespread damage in Seoul as well as mountainous and coastal areas. The rare typhoon has been sweeping in towards southern Japan and is now heading north nearing Korea's Jeju Island. Solek is forecast to hit the city of Gwangju on Thursday afternoon and move towards Gangwon-do province by Friday afternoon, bringing heavy rainfall and strong wind gusts. 서은경, Arirang News.
And a typhoon warning has just been issued for Jeju Island to the south of the peninsula as of 4 p.m. Korea Standard Time. Because of the warning and the wind picking up, more than 130 flights at Jeju International Airport have been canceled. There was pandemonium at the airport earlier today as passengers tried to change their flights to an earlier time. With Typhoon Soulik to make landfall tomorrow, the airport chaos is expected to continue. The government, meanwhile, is getting ready for the typhoon. On Wednesday, Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun presided over a meeting at the country's Disaster Control Center and called on the Safety Ministry, the Weather Agency, and other relevant ministries to be fully prepared for the storm. The PM told officials to inspect a range of facilities that might be vulnerable, including farms and fisheries, and to take measures to prevent casualties. He also called on the ministries to be ready to respond quickly in case of emergencies to minimize damage and losses. In other news, the government will be lending a helping hand to small business owners and the self-employed who've had to deal with sharp increases in the minimum wage for this year and next. They'll get tax breaks and lots more so they can handle the extra labor costs. Our economics correspondent Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
The measures laid out by the government on Wednesday that will take effect starting next year provide financial support equivalent to over $6 billion, around $2 billion more than this year. To lessen the burden stemming from the minimum wage hikes, the government says it's expanding the Job Stabilization Fund to small businesses with 5 employees or less from the current $116 to $134. The government also says it'll change the threshold for small businesses. They'll be exempt from paying value-added taxes in full. The threshold will rise to $27,000 of annual sales from the current $21,500. It says it'll expand tax credits, a program that gives tax refunds to low-income households under the Earned Income Tax Credit Scheme from the current $357.8 million to $1.2 billion. New recipients in 2019 will be eligible for a 50% discount on their health insurance fees, while this year's recipients will receive a 30% discount next year. The government will provide 10% tax credits on monthly housing rent for diligent small business owners with a composite income of less than $54,000. They're also eligible for a 15% tax credit for their medical and education expenses for a maximum of 3 years. The package also includes a cut in credit card commissions and special loans of less than 1% for small online business owners and private taxi drivers. The government also laid out measures to protect franchisees from franchise headquarters engaging in unfair business practices. It also gives groups of small businesses the right to recommend a member to be nominated for the Minimum Wage Committee to reflect their views on minimum wage increases. The government plans to submit the related bills during the August parliamentary session. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
The US and China are set to revive trade negotiations that ended unsuccessfully in June, with a meeting in Washington on Wednesday local time. However, neither side is optimistic of making much progress. Isingje reports.
The world's two biggest economic powerhouses are set to take another stab at easing their trade tensions, as U.S. Treasury Undersecretary David Malpass will meet with his Chinese counter, Wang Shouwen, in Washington on Wednesday. The meeting will be the first between senior officials since June, when U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross met Chinese Vice Premier Liu He, ended with an agreement. According to U.S. and Chinese officials, this week's talks will center on a list of more than 140 specific demands, which were originally drafted by the Trump administration for the first round of trade talks in May. This includes the U.S. wanting China to raise the value of its currency. Sources say in a private discussion with U.S. counterparts, Chinese officials have indicated they would be willing to implement or discuss about 2/3 of the demands. However, neither side is optimistic the upcoming meeting can succeed, where 3 earlier rounds have failed. In an interview with Reuters on Monday, President Trump said he had low expectations for the talks, and the U.S. was in no rush to resolve the dispute. Beijing officials have said that Trump's constant provocations have made it extremely difficult for them to offer conciliatory gestures. Despite many American businesses being affected by the recent tit-for-tat measures, observers say Trump believes he can win a trade war with China. This, according to watchers, adds to the chance that President Trump will proceed with his latest threat to hit China with tariffs on another $200 billion worth of goods. Isingje, Arirang News.
Now, to help us better understand the latest developments that are going on right now, we have with us Professor Shin Sang-yup from Kyung University. Professor Shin, thank you for coming in today.
My pleasure.
Now, trade talks between the US and China are set to take place in just a few hours. But that report we just heard says there's not much hope of significant progress being made. Do you see it the same way?
I think so, yeah, because the last 2 months, during the May and June, USA and China had the 3 rounds of talks to find a solution for the trade war between two countries, but they failed. The reason why they cannot produce very fruitful outcomes at the talks is this issue is not simple. This is very complicated. What I'm talking about is that, this issue, is not limited to only economic or trade issues. I think the USA and China, they are competing each other to get the hegemonic power in the region. That means we should consider political factors, economic factors, and even social factors. So I think if this is the given condition on this issue, definitely it will be very difficult for them to get the solution easily. So in this context, at this talk, it seems to be quite difficult for us to see the very successful outcomes at the negotiations between USA and China.
Trump himself, in an interview on Monday, said that he does not anticipate anything to come out of these rounds of talks. Now, if the president says that, then it must mean that the talks really are doomed to fail from the start. Do you think Trump will have ordered his officials to make it difficult and not really come back with anything?
Well, I want to talk about the statement made by the President Trump very recently. He emphasized that the currency value, Chinese currency value, he emphasized the Chinese government manipulating the value of the Chinese yuan in order to minimize the negative impact on the Chinese economy caused by the very high tariff rates the USA government has imposed on Chinese products. Well, this is the one fact we have to consider to understand USA government stance. As I already explained, China is right now become a one of the biggest economy. They want to the IT. They have the largest IT industries in the world. But the USA did not see those kind of changes in China. So definitely, in other words, there must be some severe competition between USA and China to get the hegemonic power. So considering the economic foundations of USA, which is much stronger than China, the USA does not seem to have any reasons to change their stance about this issue. And then when you look at the Chinese stance, definitely so far, Chinese government has taken retaliatory action measures against the USA's very protectionistic trade policies. So for the time being, I mean, the conditions would continue. And then when and who will change first? I think, as I already explained before, considering the economic foundations, definitely China will change first, I think. But we have to wait and see, because China is certainly one of the largest economies. So for a time being, until we see the change of Chinese stance on this issue, we have to wait.
So if you think that there's not going to be much to come out of these talks, then why meet now? Why have this meeting?
Yes, that's a good question. I think that, you know, they should, they seem to recognize the, if the situations continue, both will get damages on their economy. They knew it very well, though. So they want to keep the channels of dialogue between two countries. But I want to talk about the, you know, the recent change on the stance of both countries about the negotiation. Very recently, head of the negotiation, became the vice minister level officials, right? This is I think a change made by both governments in order to prepare for more productive, higher level negotiations about this issue. What I mean is that, you know, for the last 2 months, as I already explained, for the last May and June, there were 3 rounds of negotiations. They failed to produce very productive outcomes at these talks. So by appointing the vice level officials for this talk, they want to keep discussing about this issue, and they prepare for higher level official talks for this issue. This means that they certainly show the very clear intention to maintain the communication channel between two countries. Without it, it seems to be more serious, and then both sides, by maintaining the communication channel, they want to they keep the possibility, even though it's not very big though, possibility for the solving this issue in the near future.
There are commentaries that are coming out that say that this China bashing by Trump is part of his administration's plan to win votes in the next midterm elections that are coming up in November, rather than trying to tackle any real trade issues that they have. Would you agree with this assessment?
Yes, I think so. I agree with this assessment, because midterm examination, which is scheduled to be held in November, I think it seems to be very important for President Trump and his administration. And then I think that his administration is using every means to make the very favorable circumstances for the midterm election. So in this context, as I already before, he has stepped up his pressure on Chinese government regarding the trade conflict. And by doing so, maybe he wants to get the support from his voters, you know. By reducing the trade deficit in the trade with China, the USA economy achieved about 4.1% economic growth last quarter, and then even the coming quarter, the expected economic growth rate of USA even reached to 5%. And if the economic growth reached to such a kind of high rates, then people will satisfy with, and then they will have some, they did not change their support for Mr. Trump, and this will be very important for him in the midterm election. So certainly in this context, he has stepped up the pressure against the Chinese government, particularly trade relations with China.
And very briefly, before we move on, Trump famously explained that trade wars are easy to win. Who would you say is winning right now?
We don't have to take his explanation as he does. I think it's not easy, though. But as I already explained, the economic foundations of USA seems to be stronger than Chinese ones. And in other words, China is an important trade partner for USA economy. but the USA seems to be a more important trade partner for the Chinese economy. So if situation continue for a while, certainly USA seems to take the more advantageous situation than China does. So I think the USA could win at this trade war against China, but who knows? But they have more possibility. But one thing which I want to underline is that if the situation goes on, it's not good for both sides, not USA economy, but the Chinese economy as well, too.
China, of course, is not the only adversary that the US is having disputes with. They're also having various economic and political disputes with Turkey. And that's ended up having very strong consequences there. The value of the Turkish currency, the lira, has fallen 40% since the beginning of the year, a staggering amount. Have you seen anything like this before?
Well, not very much, though. I mean, the Turkish lira actually was not stable currency. What I mean is that the Turkish economy has some structural problems, difficulties. I mean, you know, in 2008, there was the global financial crisis. Since 2008, Turkish economy was in good shape. For example, in 2010, the Turkish economy recorded about 10% economic growth. But the point which I want to underline is that how they could achieve such a very high economic growth. I mean, that is because of the foreign direct investment. Since the 2008, I mean, at the time they were so PIGS, P-I-G-S. That means the many investment, which was made into the Portugal, Italy, and Spain. The investors withdrew their money from these countries and they tried to find another destination of the investment. Turkey became the destination of one of the destinations of those investments. So the Turkey could attract a huge amount of investment. Owing to such a huge amount of foreign direct investment, their economy could be in a good shape. But you know, one thing which is very important for us to discuss about foreign direct investment is that political stability seems to be the #1 factor affecting the foreign direct investment. But as we discussed before, the Turkish political stability was not very firm, so the Turkish economy was directly affected by the political stability. If the political stability was destroyed, then more people, more investors wanted to withdraw money from the Turkey. So the Turkish economy was not very stable. Under such a kind of situation, then the USA government imposed the very high tariffs on Turkish products such as the aluminum and then steel products. So on the top of the existing some risky the environment, the American decision, they made the situation getting worse. So right now the Turkish economy seems to be facing the very serious situation, and to manage the economic stability, they decided to borrow the money, $34 billion loan from, $15 billion from Qatar, and then they decided to get the loan of $3.6 billion from China. And actually, to pay back the short-term foreign debt, it was reported that they should have to prepare about $200 billion. Considering all of this, definitely Turkish economic situation seems to be very serious.
Yes, very serious indeed. There were also concerns that the lira crisis would have consequences that would affect South Korea and Asia in general as well. But although there was a dip in the stock market last week, they seems to have mostly recovered, and it's hard to notice the major effects right now for us, it seems. Is that the right view?
Yes or no. I mean, the Turkish situation certainly would give the negative impact on the economies of the rising, new emerging countries' economy. Certainly, let me tell you more details about the Korean economic situation. I mean, how much the effect we will get from the Turkish situation. We are quite lucky because, Hyundai, SK, CJ, such a kind of Korean business conglomerate started the business in Turkey quite for a long time ago. But one thing, because as I already explained before, the lira was not stable currency. So in case of the big Korean companies, when they started the business, they have used the USA dollar as a way of payment. So because of the lira crisis this time, I think that they will get very limited the damages. But the one thing which I'm really concerned about is that the damages which Korean small and medium-sized companies could get, or Korean personals could get from the lira crisis this time, because they have used the lira as a way of payment, so they will be affected by the lira crisis in Turkey. One thing more is that, you know, in the stock market, according to the companies in Korea, we have about the 100 billion won stocks, bond in lira, that it will be directly affected by the lira crisis. But you know, considering the total size of the Korean stock market, 100 billion won, I think is not big money. So the damages which Korean economy will get from the lira crisis is very limited. But depending on the economic foundations, some Asian countries will, rising emerging countries will get more serious damages from the lira crisis.
Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you for coming in, Professor, and shedding some more light on some of the top issues today.
My pleasure.
Now, that's all from us at this hour, but before I go, I just want to warn our viewers in Korea that Typhoon Soulik is heading to the peninsula, and forecasts warn that it's going to be a big one. So please do be careful and take any necessary precautions. Thank you for watching and hope you can join us again next time. Goodbye.